Thank you very much, Ajay. A pleasure to be here to be speaking to Khaki Talks, and my thanks to Sukhi for this very warm invitation to come here and be with all of you. My many thanks to the Japan Foundation, who gave me a fellowship to complete my research on the subject which you're going to see today. My grateful thanks to the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India, for having sponsored the making of this film, which you're going to see today. And my many thanks to my wife, Sujata Chatterjee, who makes everything that I do possible. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when I started looking at art history about 50 years ago, I was fascinated that one of the most popular books on art history of Asia had the title The Art of Indian Asia by Henrik Zimmer. I wondered why it had that title. In 2001, when I was shooting my series of 26 films on the paintings of India, one of the many museums who very kindly cooperated immensely for this shooting was the Berlin State Museums. And now, what was the name of that museum? The name of the museum was Museum of Indian Art. Though the collections of that museum actually covered a very wide range from Central Asia, from East Asia, from Southeast Asia, and of course South Asia too. But the museum was called Museum of Indisch Kunst, Museum of Indian Art. I may have got that pronunciation slightly wrong, but that was the name of the museum. And when I was shooting there, I asked them, I said, why do you call it Museum of Indian Art when it is a museum very widely covering Asian art? So they said the art may come from very many different countries, but it is Indian art. It is Indian in theme, it is Indian inspiration, it's Indian in style, it is all Indian art. And by the time I went shooting again to the Berlin State Museum, that was for my series on the sculpture of India, in 2006, by then the name of the museum had been changed to Museum of Asian Art. But this will begin to give you a sense of how much the Indian cultural traditions had spread across the whole of Asia. Now, how many are aware that almost all, perhaps all in fact, the Hindu deities that we worship today in India are worshipped by the people of Japan on a regular basis? How many are aware that there are hundreds of temples to Saraswati alone across Japan? Scores of them in Tokyo itself. In fact, deities that we have practically forgotten in India, like Vayu and Varuna, are worshipped regularly in Japan. And how many are aware that the havan, the homa, called goma in Japan, takes place as often in Japan as it takes place in India? And not just the havan, but the havan is accompanied by chanting in Sanskrit. Best of all, how do the Japanese priests, most of them who do not know how to read Sanskrit, how do they chant in Sanskrit so perfectly? And that is because the very alphabet of Japan, kana, was in fact modeled upon the phonetics, the sounds of Sanskrit. Amazing. And this was done so that this chanting, which you see in the temples, could be made possible. Because the meaning of the words is very important, and the sound of the words is equally important. And Sanskrit is very much revered in Japan. Now, how many are aware that practically every single home in Japan has in it the Sanskrit alphabet, which is kept in the shrine room and is worshipped? And this alphabet is the 5th, 6th century of alphabet of Sanskrit called Sindham, something which has been forgotten in India but continues to be used daily in Japan. As a matter of fact, if you wish to learn Sanskrit in the Siddham alphabet, the only place in the world that you can go to is Koyasan in Japan. So this is the amazing connection between India and Japan. The very foundations of so much of Japanese culture, as you will see in this film, are built upon what came from India. And of course, for Sujata and myself and for our crew, it was an immense pleasure to be in Japan because the people of Japan are just so wonderful. Every day that we were shooting in Japan, there were smiles upon our faces because of the kindness and courtesy of the Japanese people. Everywhere in Japan, they were just so wonderful. And they say that this courtesy is the courtesy that was found in ancient India. As a matter of fact, what made this very difficult shooting possible was also the fact that people like Keiko Ito, one of the very, very senior translators and interpreters in Japan, came forward out of a sense of a karma yoga, selfless duty, to be with us during all our days in Tokyo and to be with us from morning till night. And she used to go back at night and used to study further the various details of the temple she was going to take us to the next day. And with this selfless duty and this wonderful courtesy and this kindness and warmth, she helped us through the shooting in Tokyo. And the shooting in Kyoto and Nara, for that there was another karma yogi. Her name was Chisato Nakayama. She lived in North Japan, and she came to Nara and then Kyoto to be with us from morning till night and to selflessly help us with all the kindness and courtesy that is possible. So warmly and so wonderfully to translate for us, to help us, to do so much for us. In fact, if I may say so, she practically looked after me like one would look after a father. And she got everything done so well. It's marvelous to be with the people of Japan. Now, the biggest hurdle that there was in shooting the film, everybody told me, was that the Japanese temples are not open to video shooting. And the Japanese chief priests are not open to giving interviews for video cameras. So I wrote to the 50 most important Buddhist temples in Japan, hoping that at least 2 or 3 might say yes. And that would have been quite enough actually to make a very striking film. And I had some advantage because almost 100 Buddhist temples of Japan have held my photographic exhibitions on Buddhist heritage of India and of the world. Now, would you believe it? All 50 temples said yes. So, therefore, we were able to really put together something very wide-ranging and put together an archive of information about this very important subject. So it gives me the greatest of pleasure today to present this film to you. And I'll be very happy to answer questions for you after the screening. And I would request that the film may please be run now. Thank you so much.
Along with the ideas of Buddhism and Hinduism, the culture of Indian deities traveled across the whole of Asia.
Very interestingly, more than 80% of Japanese gods are originally Indian gods.
This close relationship between the people of India and Japan has not been known to most people. Well-researched books on the subject are also not available.
Most of Japanese don't know. For example, I live in Kichijoji, in the outskirts of Tokyo. This Kichijoji literally means Temple of Kisho Goddess. And Kisho is originally Lakshmi. So thus, I came from Lakshmi town. This should be recognized by Japanese people, the bottom of Japanese culture. Indian culture is very strongly imprinted and developed in the Japanese way.
The Todaiji temple at Nara is one of the oldest and most revered temples of Japan. The 48 feet high Vairochana here is the largest bronze statue in the world.
Already in the 8th century, Indian Buddhist monk named Bodhisena has arrived to Japan, and he inaugurated the eye-opening the ceremony of Great Buddha of Todaiji Temple in 752.
Bodhisena and Buddhasthira, they then went to a temple nearby Dayanji, where they started the teaching of Sanskrit in Japan for the first time.
When the Japanese studied Sanskrit in the 8th and 9th centuries, Sanskrit was synonymous with the Siddham script. This was used for writing Sanskrit since the 5th century in India.
Thus, Japan and India was very closely connected. If you go to Japanese tomb, you may find sit-down letters. No Japanese can read these letters written on the tomb timber. And again in Japan, there is a Koya-san temples. In these Koya-san temples, they have still sit-down Sanskrit the school. Many monks are learning this Sanskrit, but the Sanskrit is sit-down letters. So perhaps Japan is a time capsule of Indian culture. Already in India disappeared.
There is a deep relationship between kana, the Japanese alphabet, and Sanskrit. The Japanese wrote Sanskrit through simplified Chinese characters which developed into the Japanese alphabet, kana.
And this Japanese, the alphabet, the pronouns, a, I, U, E, O, like Sanskrit, exactly as the Sanskrit.
In Japan, they also use the Indian letters for writing of sacred syllables or bijaksharas, which have the power of mantras. Every Buddhist monastery in Japan has a seal in which there is a bijakshara, a sacred syllable, as a short name of the monastery. There are some words in Japanese which are derived from Sanskrit, like O Seva, from Seva, service. And there are about 100 Sanskrit words which are used in Japanese.
Most of the Japanese, they are using that, but without knowing that that is the originally from Sanskrit. Suppose like they call the Buddhist temples at Thera. Thera means it is from the Pali term Thera, means a Buddhist monk, a bhikshu having 10 years experience.
In the words of His Excellency Mr. Yasukuni Enoki, as I come from the Japanese Lakshmi town, it is no great surprise to me to find that Japanese life is full of so many Hindu deities. Japanese people are unaware of their origins. One of the most revered deities of Japan is Saraswati. There are scores of shrines built to her. In many ways, the original concept of Saraswati and her association with the natural order and good fortune are very well preserved in Japan. She is often visualized as a sacred body of water. In Japan, we find the continuance of so many early ideas of Indian philosophy. The annals of the Todaiji temple mention that the celebration of the worship of Lakshmi and Saraswati was held for the first time in this temple in 722 AD. Ever since, it has been an annual celebration. In 1836, Saito Sachio wrote a guidebook to the Edo area or modern Tokyo. Saraswati was mentioned as the most popular deity here at that time. In 1934, Lady Chibin Sonyo felt that she had become an incarnation of Saraswati. She started writing in Sanskrit, though she had never studied the language. She founded the Benten Shu Saraswati sect. This sect holds water as divine, as it is the abode of Saraswati. We are reminded that Saraswati is the personification of the great river which once flowed in India. Benten Shu also worships her to bestow eloquence and learning. Worship of Lakshmi was done to ensure the peace of the land, wind and rain in good season, good harvests, joy of the people, and the good of all sentient beings. The great intellectual genius of Japan was Kukai or Kobo Daishi of the 9th century. He learnt the Sanskrit script from the Kashmiri Acharya Pragnya. Kobo Daishi placed emphasis on a knowledge of Sanskrit. He said that the Japanese have had to rely upon translations to study Buddhism. However, the true words in the original language are exceedingly important. Every word has a profound meaning.
The Japanese people use Sanskrit when they pray. Suppose in Sanskrit they say, Om Saraswati Swaha. In Japanese it becomes Om Saraswati K Swaka. In Japan, they are preserving the old Indian tradition because they are following the ancient scriptures. They are also doing the puja and the mudras as well as the sadhana. There is nothing called Japanese or Japanese elements in these. It is the Indian Buddhist tantric tradition.
The Vajrayana Buddhist traditions of Japan trace their knowledge back to India, to Nagarjuna and other great acharyas of the Nalanda University.
Nagarjuna is known as Gujio in Japan. Without his teaching, the Buddhism of the great vehicle would not have existed.
The Lotus Sutra is a major spiritual creation with a profound impact on life in Japan. It was translated from the Sanskrit by Kumara Jiva 1600 years ago.
This is a temple that follows the Lotus Sutra. The sutra is originally from India and goes back to the teachings of the Buddha himself. It started from India and came to Japan.
A temple is dedicated to the deity Indra in the Shibamata area of Tokyo. It is a most important Indra shrine today.
This temple has 200,000 visitors on the New Year alone. There would be about 2 million visitors every year.
Varuna has been worshipped in many temples in Japan to prevent droughts, typhoons and floods which occur often in Japan. A shrine was dedicated to Varuna in the Fudodo Sanctuary in Tokyo in 1836. The temple also has a representation of Kamadeva. He is worshipped by many young couples. There are many temples dedicated to Yama in Japan.
The sound of the word Yama became Emma as the name traveled and came to Japan.
It is the most ancient temple to Lord Ganesha which has been in use for the last 1,000 years. And young boys and girls go there to be successful in their courtship. The merchants go there to gain success in their business. The oldest, which has been continuously in worship for the last 1,000 years. And I don't think anywhere in the world we have a temple to Lord Ganesha who has been there in constant worship for the last millennium.
In the 7th century, Prince Shotoku created the nation-state of Japan after vanquishing his rivals. He took the term Tenno for emperor from Sanskrit texts.
And at the same time, he also wrote down a constitution for his country in 17 articles. Article 3 of the constitution clearly points out that the constitution is being based on the three Ratna, the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. This is the first Asian constitution ever written. Important point is that its consecration was done with a Sanskrit text which is called the Ushnisha Vijaya Dharani.
The Sanskrit manuscript used for the consecration of the constitution would have been obtained from the Hindu kingdom of Champa in Vietnam. Havan or homa continues in Japan, where it is called goma. Goma in the Shingon and Tendai Buddhist sects of Japan has striking parallels with early Hindu rites of Agni worship. There are also deep similarities with the later Tantric tradition. The havan is perhaps conducted in Japan at least as often as in India. The Tantric Shingon school of Japan sings Sanskrit hymns. To this day, followers of the sect perform their worship in 1,200 temples throughout Japan.
Esoteric Buddhism is from India, and the big philosophy of the universe is, of course, from India.
Vajrayana Buddhist worship in Japan is similar to Tibetan Buddhist worship. However, the Japanese tradition has preserved some early Vajrayana rites. A study of Japanese Buddhism helps to fill some gaps in our understanding of the development of Buddhism.
There are 4 types of Shingon mantras or Fudo-myu in Japan. These are the mantras used in Japan which are not in the Japanese language. They are taken from the Sanskrit language of India. In Sanskrit, Fudo is called Achalanatha. He seems to have his origin in the Hindu deity Shiva. The Mu is called Vidya Raja in Sanskrit. Here, it can be safely stated that Fudo-myu has his origin in the Hindu deities of India.
sutra compares the cosmic force of the mantra with the mighty roar of a rising flood. The mantras were transcribed into ideograms, and to conserve their full power, they were also written in Siddham. Indian letters to a Japanese are sacred and stand for divine beings. To this day, the Japanese write mantras in Siddham.
This booklet contains prayers in Sanskrit that are commonly used in Shingonshu or esoteric Buddhism. It is written in Japanese, but the mantras are in Sanskrit. It is used in many ceremonies in Buddhism. Priests learn the intonation and how to pronounce it by using this booklet, which has Sanskrit and also has Japanese letters to convey the sounds of the Sanskrit words.
今言われましたようにね、ここは
Every god has his own Bija Akshara. People also worship that Bija Akshara. Every temple gives much importance to those Bija Aksharas because they are equal to God.
いろんな仏様、神様。
スタンプを押すその
Visitors bring an album. We call it Shinchin. The visitors go to various temples and collect these Siddham stamps in the albums. These albums are like holy books for the people.
ペーパーになってるのがありまして、
私たちは禅寺ですのでね。
We belong to a Zen Buddhist monastery, and we strive hard to sever the bond of birth, senility, disease and death. The bond which is the cause of all suffering. As the Buddha said, desire is the root cause of pain in the world and should be overcome. This forms the basis of our ascetic practices, which come down to us from the Shakyamuni himself.
Bodhidharma, he transmitted Zen. Zen later has been transmitted to Japan also, and it is one of the most important sects in Japan.
Mist surround the legend of Bodhidharma. Tradition points out that he was a prince of Kanchipuram in South India. The Japanese form of his name is Bodhai Daruma. It is very close to the Tamil form, which is Bodhi Daruma. Zen was introduced in the 6th century. It was a wordless tradition, directly pointing to the human mind and the perception of one's true nature. Zen was taken to Japan in the 12th century by Isai. Its influence on Japanese art, attitudes and language has been profound.
Zen Buddhism became very popular because it says that life is a fleeting phenomenon. And the samurai, when they went to war, they were never sure that they will come back. In this feeling, they go to war and there is no fear of death. So fearlessness in war was a very important contribution of the Zen tradition. And if you sit down, and when we sit down in a Zen monastery, you have to really do a very hard penance. And hard work in Japan is perfection. So it is the Zen tradition gave them a perfection in work. Force became a very important part of the modern development, perfection in everything.
初めてインドに参りました時、
When I visited India for the first time, I made sure to visit places like Nalanda University, Bodh Gaya, and also the garden path trodden by the Shakyamuni himself. I felt happy to see the university where Tripitaka masters used to come and study during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD.
思いを寄せたわけです。
Whatever Buddhism we practice now has its roots in India, and without Indians, there would be no Buddhism in Japan.
この仏教はなかったわけでありますから。
インドでも日本でも
So many deities are common in India and Japan, and people are worshipping them in both the countries.
共通しているということは、まさしく
The hearts of the Indian people and the Japanese people have the same base.
つながっている一つの証ではないかと思います。
Japan is the one country where Buddhism is flourishing in all its facets. Here, technology and transcendence are living together. The deep-rooted spirit of Buddha's teachings energize the Japanese people. Buddhist temples are numerous, and vast numbers of people visit them every day. Besides the Buddha, so many ancient Indian deities and practices are preserved in these temples. An Indian feels quite at home in Japan.
You saw how ancient traditions are preserved in Japan. While there are scores and scores of temples to Saraswati in the form in which we know her today, with the Veena standing for eloquence, standing for inspiration, standing for knowledge, standing for so much of the finer qualities within us. While there are so many images to her in that form, the Japanese do not forget her as the river Saraswati, the personification of the abundance which is provided by the river. So there are in fact scores and scores of shrines to Saraswati as water. And of course, you saw that there's a massive temple to Lord Indra, which receives over 1 million visitors every year. reminds me that the very first of Indian deities that were seen in Indian art was at the Buddhist caves of Bhaja in Western India in Maharashtra, where there were images of Lord Indra and Surya. So these were the earliest representations of deities that we find surviving in Indian art. And of course, the earliest images of Saraswati and Lakshmi were also in Buddhist stupa railings at Bharhut in central India and in the earlier stupa at Sanchi. These are stupas of the 2nd century BCE, where we saw Lakshmi as Gaj Lakshmi with elephants pouring water on her. And thereafter, we see her later in many temples all over the country. So these wonderful traditions of truly ancient Indian art are so well preserved in Japan. And what is most important is the ethics, the kindness and courtesy associated with ethical spiritual practice. The discipline which is associated with spiritual practice, which is the most important gift of India to the whole world, particularly well received all across Asia. That is so well preserved in Japan. Today, in fact, it gives us the opportunity to see that and revive our own ancient thought processes. It is this which truly makes the Indian philosophical traditions and the Indian traditions of life, the Indian traditions of how to live, so beautiful and so important. It is these that take us away from the cares and confusions of the material world to the peace which can only be found within us. And the marvelous thing is that both in ancient India and in Japan today, all this wonderful understanding of the spiritual quest does not take away from material well-being. As a matter of fact, ancient India was extremely prosperous, and Japan, with all its discipline and meditative thought processes, is even today extremely successful. So it is really with dedication, it is really with sincerity, it is really with ethical foundation that we lay the ground for success in all aspects of life. Of course, most importantly, in those aspects of life which provide us the joy from within, which awaken the joy from within us. So I'll be happy to answer some questions, please.
That's very fascinating, Professor Behl. Really, and I think there's a lot of appreciation in the group for what we just witnessed. So I have a question which I think even Shweta had asked, and I'll ask her question first and then tag on my question too. Shweta's question is, both Hindu and Buddhist gods are worshipped. Was Hinduism also followed separately in Japan? And my sort of question, which tags very closely to that, is so I was really curious to understand how they merge their Buddhist religion with these Indian, dare I say it, Hindu gods. I mean, are there more, is it more about iconism and symbolism, or are there origin stories? Are there facts about what they've done as gods and goddesses that they're revered for? Are they any different from what we see in India? I think there's several questions wrapped into that.
Right, thank you. The important thing to understand is that in the ancient traditions, in ancient India, There were no separations of religions in the modern or Western sense of the term of religion. As a matter of fact, if you look at the inscriptions from ancient India, and please remember that at least 95% of all the history that we know of ancient India comes from these inscriptions. If you look at those inscriptions, you realize that practically every single family that we know about from ancient India had in it someone who was worshipping a Hindu deity, somebody who was worshipping a Buddhist or Jaina deity, and there were no strong divisions as such between these. Therefore, a person used to worship the deity of his choice, depending upon which were the fine qualities that he wished to awaken within himself. And there was no antagonism, there was no difference, there were no walls, there were no barriers between the different deities. And that is why, as I mentioned before, the earliest depictions of the Hindu deities, Indra, Brahma, and then Saraswati, Lakshmi, all these are in fact in Buddhist and, if I may add, Jaina stupa railings. Of course, this leads me also to point out to you that though the colonial historians somehow didn't talk about it so much, but the Jainas had as many stupas and stupa railings, just like the Buddhists, as did Buddhists. And if you were to go to the Mathura Museum, or if you were to go to the Lucknow Museum, you will see the remains from so many Jaina stupas. So it is all the same. Essentially, to understand the Indian traditions, we have to understand the fact that there was an understanding that there is something beyond material life, that the material world that we see around us is Maya or Mithya, an illusion brought to us, perceived by us because of the limitations of our senses and sensibilities. Therefore, the high purpose in life was to go beyond these material concerns and to try to pierce beyond the Maya or Mithya, lift the veils of illusion and be able to see that which is lasting, that which may be eternal. That was the basic quest. And in that, all these faiths were the same. And yes, thank you very much.
Some comments. Jay Davande says, my friend visited Okinawa, which is a small Japanese island. Even there was a monument from the 16th century. Smriti Haldipur says, deeply appreciate, grateful, thank you very much. Archana Shekhar says, thank you very much for letting me attend. It's very late in Sydney, so I will watch the remaining on your YouTube channel. Lots of comments here. Jyoti Kekar says, what image of Varun and Vayu are revered or prayed to?
These are yes. These are the typical images as we know them of all the Hindu deities, with all the iconography that we see in the Hindu deities that are revered in Japan. And fascinating to see there's so much which is retained in Japan. For instance, when I study Buddhism, I am so much aware of the great contributions of Asanga and Vasubandhu, who had studied at the Nalanda University and who had in Kashmir begun the Yogacara school of Buddhism. Now, where do you see representation of them? Of course, you see it at Nara, in the ancient temple there, statues of Asanga and Vasubandhu. So it's quite fascinating to see the sincerity and the seriousness with which traditions are maintained in Japan. And wonderful for us to see our own traditions maintained so well, along with along with what comes from these traditions, which is discipline, which is courtesy, which is kindness. And truly, I believe Japan and India should understand each other much better and show to the world the importance of these great ethical traditions. Thank you.
There's a very interesting thing you just said, which I want to sort of explore a little bit, which is, Japan has preserved these traditions in temples, and as you said, meanwhile in India, some of these practices have evolved or changed. In fact, in the video, I think there's a reference to a Ganpati temple which has been, has been worshipping him for a millennium, whereas I can't think of any in India that has carried on this tradition for a millennium. So, is there anything in Japan's approach to cultural, religious preservation, or perhaps as a way of life, which is different from India's, and which is why we have this dichotomy of how it's been preserved in these two places differently?
The Japanese scholars and others say that they have in fact imbibed and inherited the Indian traditions. And you see it in everything. For instance, there was an Indian tradition of respect for elders. I remember how much respect we used to give to our elders. We used to respect them simply because they were old. Now, where is it maintained so beautifully today? In Japan. As a matter of fact, when I was being interviewed for the first time in Japan, back in 1993 by a newspaper, the first question they asked me was, how old are you? I found that strange at that time, but I told them how old I was. Makes a lot of sense. Because the same words, if they are being spoken by a 30-year-old, and those very words, if they are being spoken by a 60-year-old, have a very different meaning. And there's a different seriousness with which you may hear them. So there are so many things. It's a very, very shared culture. It's in everything. And fortunately, they have preserved it. If you look at it, so many things are preserved by outsiders who get to learn them and imbibe them and inherit them. For instance, look at Tibet. They imbibe the knowledge of the Nalanda University, where so many thousands of treatises were written, where logic was developed, where epistemology was developed, where the foundations for the universities of the entire world were laid, whose traditions were carried all the way even to Europe when the first universities were opened in Europe. Now, all this is maintained so well by Tibet. And incidentally, Tibet is another place where their script and much of their language, in fact, was entirely based upon Sanskrit. The idea was that the knowledge in Sanskrit was so important that they had to have a way of preserving it and carrying it forward. So with that great aim in mind, they created a script. They created a language which was able to follow the syntax and meaning of what you found in Sanskrit. Take a look at Mongolia. The Swambhu script of Mongolia was based upon Sanskrit. And these are just a few examples of the wonder that was the culture of India and how it was preserved so well by so many people. And you see it in so many different ways. If you go to the embassy of Indonesia in Washington, D.C., what do you see right in front of the embassy? A big statue of Saraswati, clearly labeled as a deity of learning. And what do you see when you go to Thailand? The street crossings have statues of all the Indian deities, Lord Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu, all of them are there. So there is so much which is preserved everywhere, and it's sometimes it's us in the modern world who have forgotten these things. Thank you.
So I just want to read some things that people have posted. Shweta says, thank you so much for the explanation, presumably on the question of Hindu and Buddhist gods that you answered. Also, a lot of people have said, fascinating story. Your voice is so soothing and very spiritual. So it certainly has certain ASMR quality to it, if I may say so. Jay has a question which is like Buddhism, is Shintoism also influenced by the ancient India, Hinduism, Buddhism, and so on?
I'm so sorry. I've not had the opportunity to properly study Shintoism, but Buddhism and Buddhist temples I have studied, so I could bring it before you. Thank you.
Do you have a sense that, I mean, does the average Japanese person have an understanding of this Indian connection, or is it just now so ingrained, through the millennium that it's now become part and parcel of sort of the local culture and ethos, and they don't stop to sort of think about where the origins of all of this comes from?
The average person does not know the origins, as was also said by the former ambassador of Japan in the film. The average person does not know these origins. But among the educated people, a lot of people are aware. And similarly in India, the average person, in fact in India, even hardly anybody at all knows about the Indian deities in Japan or Sanskrit in Japan. I think we should make both Indians and Japanese much more aware of these. As a matter of fact, we should definitely also set up a school of Sanskrit in India, where it is taught with the Siddham. The Siddham script should not be forgotten in India. Thank you.
So Sri Kanyati has a comment. It was a really nice session, sir. You do have such a sweet, soothing voice. Wish I can talk like this too. So Professor Behl, you have an alternative career as a voice talent. And I have one sort of final question from my side, which is, 20 plus years of research is a kind of a long journey. Was there a particular moment or a discovery that kind of made you realize this project was really, truly important? Something that sort of struck this for you?
Well, since 1993, I had been noticing in Japan that there was so many Hindu deities that were being worshipped. I was also noticing since my early visits to Japan that there was an enormous similarity between the Japanese people and the Indian people. So it is every time I went to Japan, I was able to learn some more about this. So it was a gradual evolution. And then eventually I mentioned it to the Japan Foundation, and they gave me a fellowship to make another trip to go and I had already been going to Japan with the purpose of photographing the Hindu and other deities. But finally the Japan Foundation also helped out, and I was able to do more. So it's a gradual process over the years which resulted in this. And it is part of my study of Indian and Asian art heritage over the past some 48 years. So it's been a long journey, it's been a very enjoyable journey, and it's all part of a wider journey. Thank you.
And a final comment from Jay, who just posted this. Thanks for the shrines and temples names. This is very insightful. I live in Japan. I will surely try to visit them for myself. I mean, so in closing, I just want to say, Professor Behl, thank you for opening us up really to this extraordinary hidden chapter in the story of our civilizations, I suppose. My personal takeaway from this session is that culture doesn't belong to borders. It travels, transforms, continues to connect us across time, across geography. So very grateful for your dedication in bringing these very rare glimpses into our view, and for reminding us of reminding us that India's spiritual influence quietly lives in ways we never imagined. So, Professor Behl and all of you listening in, thank you for joining Khaki Talks today, and hope to see all of you in the future editions of Khaki Talks. Thank you again, sir. Wonderful evening.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.